So as we continue on with Chapter 11, we're now going to be moving away from some of the Mendelian genetics experiments related to pea plants and look at some more complex patterns of inheritance that go beyond what Mendel looked at. And the reason for this is because some traits are not determined by just a dominant and a recessive allele like Mendel's pea plants were. Many heritable traits are not only determined by one gene with two alleles, like the case with the pea plants. Sometimes it's more complex. However, the basic principles that Mendel came up with of the law of segregation and the law of independent assortment still apply to these more complex patterns of inheritance, and we can still use Punnett squares to make predictions about genetic crosses with these other types of patterns of inheritance. So we're going to be looking focused at these three different types of inheritance that deviate from simple Mendelian patterns. The first scenario is when alleles are not completely dominant or recessive. Let's take a look at that first. One example of this is called incomplete dominance. This is when you have a cross between organisms with two different phenotypes that produces an offspring with a third phenotype that is a blending of the parental varieties. Or we could also say that the heterozygous individual has that blended phenotype. So as shown here with these flowers, there's one with purple, dark purple. That would be homozygous for purple. You have a homozygous white, and then you have the heterozygote, which is the light purple. Another example with flowers for incomplete dominance is shown here. These are snapdragons, and they come in white, red, and pink. So the red flower color is incompletely dominant to white flower color, where the heterozygous individual is going to have pink flowers. So why don't we do an example of a Punnett square for this? We're going to cross a pink snapdragon with a pink snapdragon and look at the resulting genotypic and phenotypic ratios. I like to start these kinds of problems with a key of the known information. For this particular trait, we know that the red and white flower colors are incompletely dominant. So I'm going to use R's for red. So the individual with two alleles for R, two red alleles, is going to be fully red. And the individual that has two alleles for white is going to be white. So RR equals red, WW equals white. And the reason I chose different letters is because even though it's for the same trait, I want it to be clear that they're incompletely dominant. You don't want to use a capital and a lowercase letter because then you might be confused about whether one is dominant and one is recessive. Neither is dominant and neither is recessive. And that's why the heterozygote is pink with having one R and one W allele. So the parents we said are both pink flowered snapdragons. So that cross is going to look like this, RW by RW. And again, because these are the same trait, one trait, we're going to separate out those alleles because the gamete can only have one allele for each trait. So each row or column header is going to have either an R or a W. And the resulting outcome is shown here. And now I'm going to summarize this in the form of the genotypic and the phenotypic ratios. So for the genotypic results, there's a 1 in 4 chance that the offspring will have the alleles, both alleles for red, RR, 2 out of 4 chance that they will be RW heterozygotes, and 1 out of 4 chance they'll be WW, carry both the alleles for white. And now how does that appear physically in the phenotypic results? 1 out of 4% chance, 1 out of 4 chance, or 25% chance rather, of red flowers, 2 out of 4 or 50% chance of pink flowers, and 1 out of 4 or 25% chance of white flowers. So that's interesting that if we cross two parental snapdragons with pink flowers, that the offspring could have all three possible colors, red, pink, and white, in a 1 to 2 to 1 ratio. So in our next example, we're going to look at another scenario that's an exception to Mendel's rules of complete dominance with codominance. And this is when you have a cross between organisms with two different phenotypes that produce offspring with a third phenotype in which both of the parental traits appear together. So as shown here for this cow, it has both white and brown spots on its body. It's not light brown like it mixed together. They both appear. So there's going to be a different scenario here. It's like both of those colors of fur are fighting to be shown in the pattern of the white of the cow. So let's do a Punnett square for this to determine the parental genotypes and phenotypes needed to produce only roan cattle, like shown here at the left. So we're going to have to kind of work backwards for this one. So like we did with the other example, I set up a key here to show all the possible genotypes and phenotypes. If the cow has both of the alleles for brown, BB we're going to use, then it's going to be fully 100% brown fur. If it has a B and a W, or one allele for brown and one allele for white, then they're going to have that roan color pattern, which has both brown and white in some kind of pattern. And then if the individual has only the alleles for white, then they'll be fully white fur. So the question here is, what are going to be the genotypes of the parents and phenotypes to result in 100% roan offspring? So I've went ahead and filled in the Punnett square to show the results, which again is 100%. I'm just going to summarize that on the right side here, 100% roan. And then the genotypic results would be 100% heterozygous, BW. Okay, so now we have to backwards fill in the rows and the columns. So you can pick and choose which one you prefer. I like to look at like the first letter here and look across the row. And I notice that, well, they both have a capital B. So there'd have to be a B, a capital B across actually both rows. And then in order to get a W in this same box, there would have to be W coming down the columns for both of them because they're all identical. So there we have it. The parental genotypes would be BW and BW. Or, oh, I'm sorry, BB, a fully brown with a fully crossed with a fully white, WW. So if you were a farmer looking to only put out a particular type of cow with roan color pattern, then you would have to cross a fully brown with a fully white, or a purebred brown with a purebred white cow.